So wait. So people want to believe in evolution because they want to do sexy sex, all the sex in time. That's this whole section. It's just dedicated to the Huxley brothers being perverts. That's it. Hank, you mother Freuder. AIDS. He thinks that that's what we get in return. What if this isn't exactly true? Where would that even leave me and you? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me and ring so that behold. Why would God create us evil and wrong and punish us from afar? They tell us we're broken to sell us secure, we're worthy as we are. Hello cult members, loyal subscribers, and casual viewers alike. I hope you guys are ready for the first chapter of The Farce of Evolution, but first let's go ahead and check out some of the stuff that you guys said last time. Our first comment is from Gitschlag, who writes, responding to your prompt about where we find purpose, I'm an evolutionary biologist, so I actually do spend a majority of my waking time thinking about evolution. But in all seriousness, I find a deep sense of meaning in practicing science, especially in learning as much as we can about our existence and how it fits into the broader picture of how the universe works. And this definitely is something that you don't have to be a scientist to appreciate, like natural history museums aren't just for families with kids. Beyond that, I've found from growing up in a church environment that the value of living a religious life tends to come from the personal benefits. Stuff like belonging to a community of people and a sense of being part of something bigger. Something that you feel will outlive you. Stuff that can be achieved without believing in supernatural intervention. Making art and music, finding community, learning about stuff like science and the universe, support your local museums and aquariums, mentoring younger people. All that can have a huge impact and is part of something bigger than ourselves. And it's the kind of stuff I try to fill my time with. Also, isn't it funny how professional creationists will effortlessly pivot from evolution being wrong is simply a matter of objective scientific fact, totally unbiased, to, by the way, evolution is an existential threat to all that is good, without any apparent reflection on the irony. Thank you so much, Giltschlag, for that, and I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of stuff that we can do that goes beyond us, and with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that's this top part, this transcendental needs. This idea of belonging to something bigger, and that the ideas or impact that I have now are going to somehow help other people in ways that I could never predict, and help other people in ways that continue on after I'm gone. I think that's one of the things that I really love about being a teacher. This time that I have with these students can leave such an impression, for better or for worse, and so I always try to help them out. And just knowing that there's these people now, these adults, out in the world that have had some positive interaction with me and that it's affecting other parts of their life and in a good way. That's really fulfilling. I love that. I love that I still have old students that message me, that send me gifts on my birthday, that come visit me at the school. I think that's amazing. And I definitely don't need to believe in a God for that. Also, for that last part about how they say, well, it's, simply a matter of objective fact, and then, oh my gosh, it's an existential threat to all that is good. Yeah, I don't think they realize exactly how silly that sounds. On the creationist side of it, this idea, it's sort of harmonized with this belief that we know better, but you guys are just being tricked by Satan. That's what makes it the existential threat. I think on the outside, it doesn't harmonize as well, but when you're inside of that belief system, that's kind of how you see it. This is just a work of the devil. So that's why it's so bad. We can see, because we're not being tricked by the devil, we can see how objectively wrong and stupid this is, but they're being tricked by the devil, and that's what makes it such a threat. Sapphire Light, whose profile picture actually kind of looks like my outfit today. How often in a week do you think about evolution? And they glances at YouTube history. I think evolution and creationism may be my Roman Empire. I love that you guys are thinking about this. For me, I thought, this is nothing that I could think about in the day-to-day life, because, I'm thinking about other things. I'm thinking about going to the doctor. I'm thinking about the actual Roman Empire, because I have to teach about that kind of stuff. I'm thinking about my students, and oh my goodness, the AP exams are coming up. So for me, evolution just doesn't even enter my mind, except for when we're talking about evolutionary biology in AP Psych, or when we're talking about just human evolution in world history or AP world history, or talking about evolution as it applies to plants, you know, stuff like artificial versus natural selection, that kind of thing. But beyond that, this really isn't something that enters my mind. So I was actually surprised to see that a lot of you guys actually do think about this very often. And there was a recommendation, let me scroll up here. So there was a recommendation that I received from Vice Rhino, which is pinned, and then there was also a recommendation for Gutsick Gibbon. So that is pinned. Please check them out for both of those channels. I have watched Vice Rhino's series on evolution, and it's very good. Very good stuff. Gutsick Gibbon, I'm assuming if you guys enjoy it, it's also very good. I'm trying to think if I ever did check out Gutsick Gibbon. It sounds very familiar. Let me just check real quick. I have good stuff, definitely recommend it, and that's obviously why I pinned it. Jaina July writes, Inherit the Wind may be a fictionalized version of the Scopes Monkey trial, but it's legitimately my favorite movie of all time, and it's quite tragically poetic regarding how blind faith harms both individuals and communities. I don't think that Hank really thought that perhaps some people actually like this movie. There's a few of you that did post about really enjoying Inherit the Wind and how impactful it was for you to see it. So I don't think that Hank even considered that. Bizarre Brain Comics, which, by the way, if you haven't checked out his channel, it's a great channel about just checking out different comics. I used to listen to his Bible Answer Man broadcast for years. I would listen and argue with the radio a lot, but I still learned a lot from his show, mostly about what's wrong with his religion. You know, that's one of the reasons I do recommend people listen to the opposing side, just so you can find out maybe I'm wrong, and if you don't think that you're wrong, you can at least know what the other group thinks. I mean, just this week I ran into some people who thought that atheists, that once I encountered demons, a few demons, that I'm immediately going to run to Jesus, so it doesn't matter how much I have to say. And I just replied with basically, well, why would I assume it's demons? And then if I did come to the conclusion that it's some kind of evil spirit, you know, since so many other religions have evil spirits too, why would I run to Jesus? Like this is exactly what I mean when I said that the Christians don't understand atheists, but somehow think that they can still talk to us about this topic. It's also why I love checking out conspiracy theories. In reference to something I said in the video about how people were critical that I'm removing religion but not replacing it with anything, Pink 404 says, you're replacing a lie with a truth. Nothing is lost, everything is gained. It's a positive transaction. I like that. I'm gonna add a heart. Yeah, Chloe likes it too. Shuggle's asking the important questions here. I'm curious to know if Hank Hanegraaff still subscribes to all of the details in this text since his entrance into the Greek Orthodox Church. Hank caught some real thunder doing that. Remember, his Bible Answer Man broadcast was the successor to Protestant giant Dr. Walter Martin, who was the successor to Donald Gray Barnhouse. Yeah, Chloe's definitely acted up in the background, and I did not hear that about Hank Hanegraaff, but I would be very interested. I wonder if there's a way to contact him. Way to contact him so he'll respond. Our Chapman calls him out for saying that he's not a creationist, by the way, coming after evolutionist and fraud is blatant lying. This is where I wonder, what is Hank gonna say? You know, is he gonna really go down, I'm not a creationist, I'm a proponent of intelligent design. Creationism is religiosity, but intelligent design is science. J.R. Pence writes, it feels like standard Dunning-Kruger, where the author is assuming they know much more about the topic than they actually do. It also harkens to people who are so full of information that they think there's no more for them to learn. That really reminds me of that, what was it, Ken Ham and Bill Nye, that constant, well, I have a book, you know, maybe read a different book. Maybe read more than one book, Ken. Try that. Stephen Myers writes, what a coincidence. I'm currently engaged with a dialogue with a young Earth creationist claiming the presupposition of evolution, suggesting its only purpose is to replace God. Of course, I can counter with the actual articles of presupposition, as in Statements of Faith in the Wedge document. He's yet to supply any such evidence, but he's confident in his assertions. I recommend it to Stephen to ask why he thinks that is what evolution is set out to do, that its only purpose is to replace God, and see where that goes. If it goes to, well, this is something that I've heard, or this is something that I've learned, or I don't think it makes sense, and so that's the only sense I can make of it. From there, you can talk about, well, you know, evolution and abiogenesis are different, and, you know, what about all of the Christians that accept evolution and creationism? So there are people who are even young Earth creationists, and there's this idea of, I forget the term off the top of my head, but it's this idea that evolution kind of happens in these quick jumps. jumps. And this is something that a lot of Christians at my church were really critical of, saying that, oh, evolution's supposed to take millions of years, but now they're saying that it happens so quickly. But for some people, they were actually able to kind of bring that into their young earth creationism a bit and say, well, you know, this microevolution on this kind of scale perhaps works. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Well, let's just jump in without any further ado. Truth or consequences? If you guys want to pause and come up with a prediction, that's always awesome. Helps the algorithm and all that good stuff too. And you guys have a lot more interesting stuff to read about than anything that we're gonna check out in that book. For me, I don't really have a prediction beyond maybe he's talking about the truth being Jesus and then the consequences being hell, and that's why it's so important for us to have this topic, or this talk about the topic of evolution, because if we don't have this talk about the topic of evolution, then we lose people to hell because science something Satan. That's my guess. Other than scripture, Darwin's magnum opus, The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, might as well be the most significant literary work in the annals of recorded history. Sir Julian Huxley called the evolutionary dogma it spawned the most powerful and most comprehensive idea that has ever arisen on Earth. And when we check the footnote, because we're checking all of these this time, we see that it does come from Sir Julian Huxley, 1964, as quoted in John Ankerberg and John Weldon. Darwin's Leap of Faith, 1998. Why are we doing this again? Didn't we do this last time? Something as quoted from something as quoted from something, and then we had to look it up and find out that there actually is no French guy that thinks any of this? Oh boy, we're off to a good start. Harvard scientist Ernst Mayr said that the Darwinian Revolution of 1859 was perhaps the most fundamental of all intellectual revolutions in the history of mankind. We have another footnote. I mean, good, you know. And we see again the nature of Darwinian revolution from Science, 2nd June 1972, as quoted in Henry M. Morris, The Long War Against God. Interesting. I wonder why Hank isn't going to the primary source to read it for himself. Why he's only saying as quoted in this other thing that I did read or accessed. I'm not really sure if he's claiming he read it or what, but why not read the original? Likewise, Dr. Michael Denton points out that the far-reaching effects of the Darwinian dogma ignited an intellectual revolution more significant than the Copernican and Newtonian revolutions. He goes on to say, the triumph of evolution meant the end of the traditional belief in the world as a purposeful created order, the so-called teleological outlook which had been predominant in the Western world for 2 millennia. According to Darwin, all the design, order, and complexity of life and the eerie purposefulness of living systems were the result of simple, blind, random process, natural selection. Before Darwin, men had believed in providential intelligence had imposed its mysterious design upon nature, but now chance ruled supreme. God's will was replaced by the capriciousness of a roulette wheel. The break with the past was complete. Okay, so so what? So what? Let's check the footnote. Okay, at least this actually comes from something that looks like it's the original source, Michael Denton, Evolution, A Theory in Crisis. Oh boy. You want to go back to the 80s to read this one? It would be impossible to overstate the significance of Darwinian evolution. As Denton underscores, the 20th century cannot be comprehended apart from the intellectual revolution the theory produced. The social and political currents which have swept the world in the past 80 years would have been impossible without its intellectual sanction. It is ironic to recall that it was the increasingly secular outlook in the 19th century which initially eased the way for the acceptance of evolution, while today it's perhaps the Darwinian view of nature, more than any other, that is responsible for the agnostic and skeptical outlook of the 20th century. What was once a deduction from materialism has today become its foundation. Again, I don't know how many people actually leave their religion, Christianity or otherwise, because they learned about evolution. This is a big ask. I wonder if we can find any information on it. Granted, this is a very quick check, but the only thing that I could find is that 56.5% of students, and the students being surveyed, it's 1,081 college biology students at one university, and I don't see which university real quick, but it's just one university in the United States. It just says that they they associate evolution and atheism, or that evolution itself is atheistic, but they're not saying that every person who believes that is either religious or not religious. So it's that some people who are religious think they can't accept evolution because it's atheistic, and there's other people that are perhaps non-religious that say, well, with evolution, there's not really a need for a God. So all it just says is, more than half of college biology students, but not much more than half, I mean 56%, right? They think that you can't believe in evolution and still be in a religion with a creator deity. That's it. So it also says that there's lower evolution acceptance among religious students because of the belief that evolution is atheistic. So if they believe evolution is atheistic and they're religious, there's a lower amount of religious acceptance of evolution, which makes sense, because if you think that you can't be religious and believe in evolution, then it makes sense that you wouldn't be religious believing in evolution. That's kind of, yep. Yeah, this is not too surprising. So it's 2 studies, 56.5% in the second study, and about half, it says about half in the first study. It doesn't say how many or which percentage of the students are atheist and which percentage of the students are Christian or other religion. It just says God/religion. The best we're going to get right now. I mean, how many studies are there about people who leave their religion, and then what was the push for that? What was the turning point for that? I don't know. I mean, I guess we could compile it, right? That would be fun. So let's check out the footnote here. Okay, so he's just quoting the same source, and number 5 is also going to be quoting the same source. We'll just read it while we're here. It's important to note that Denton argues that Darwinism is the only truly scientific theory of evolution. He says, reject Darwinism and there is in effect no scientific theory of evolution. Okay, but he also wrote about this in 1986. We hadn't even decoded the human genome, so who cares? But of course it's this idea that, well, because we believe in an authority, they also believe in an authority, they being us, the evolutionists or the Darwinists. Or recently I've heard scientism, so they think it's the religion of science, which is, yeah, interesting. Chloe is not a fan of that. Chloe? Yeah? Okay. Some of you guys were hoping that this book was an easier read for me in terms of like physical pain. Looks like we're already causing physical pain to Chloe. So I don't know, is this book considered animal harm? In light of this unprecedented impact of Darwinian dogma, it would be reasonable to expect it to be solidly rooted in truth. In reality, as this book will demonstrate conclusively, folks, evolution is rooted in metaphysical contentions and mythological tales. Denton aptly summed up this sentiment when he termed the Darwinian theory of evolution the great cosmogenic myth of the 20th century. And then that's when we get the comment about without Darwin there is no theory of evolution, totally ignoring that it has since been added to and built upon, right? Darwin's not the be-all, end-all of evolution. The far-reaching consequences of this cosmogenic myth can be felt in virtually every field, every discipline of study, every level of education, every area of practice. All right, what do we got? Henry M. Morris, The Long War Against God, another book from 1989. The most significant consequence, however, is that it undermines the very foundation of Christianity. If indeed evolution is reflective of the laws of science, and Genesis must be reflective of the flaws of Scripture. And if the foundation of Christianity is flawed, the superstructure is destined to fall. Well, let's be honest here. How many of you, when you started reading the Bible, immediately noticed there were some problems? Because I know that's what happened for me. That's what ended up taking me away from my faith. Not evolution, but the Bible. And I kind of joke that I was so Christian, only the Bible could make me leave Christianity. I didn't care about what other people had to say. They were just brainwashed by Satan. Only the Bible could actually show me that there was a big problem with this theology. I mean, we start off right away that the foundation of Christianity, which would be the story of Genesis, right? That is a problem right away. Why are you going to create us in a situation that we don't know anything about and then punish us for that? And then if I can't be saved on behalf of my mom, right? So my mom is saved, I don't get saved under this umbrella. And if I'm saved, my mom doesn't get saved. I know. Come here, baby. Come on. So for me, the problem was, if I'm not allowed to be saved on behalf of anybody else and vice versa, how am I punished because of Adam and Eve? That was always a big issue for me. Why do I have to suffer when I wasn't given a choice? How come they were given a choice for me? And I would even be okay with that if it wasn't later in the Bible that we're not allowed to save on behalf of. So how come only the sins of the father are impressed upon the son? Why not the wins of the father? Right? I don't know, it just seemed really unfair, just right away, and arbitrary. That was a lot of this. It just seemed very arbitrary to me. And it also just seemed like poor planning. I mean, you created us, you knew what was going to happen. Why'd you put the tree there at all? And then why'd you flood the earth? Because, oh, you regretted creating humanity. Boy, that sure sounds like a human flaw, not a God flaw. Noted atheist G. Richard Bosworth understood this full well when he penned the following words. Christianity must be, totally committed to the special creation as described in Genesis, and Christianity must fight with its full might, fair or foul, against the theory of evolution. It becomes clear now that the whole justification of Jesus' life and death is predicated on the existence of Adam and the forbidden fruit he and Eve ate. Without the original sin, who needs to be redeemed? Without Adam's fall into a life of constant sin terminated by death, what purpose is there to Christianity? None. What this all means is that Christianity cannot lose the Genesis account of creation like it could lose the doctrine of geocentrism and get along. The battle must be waged, for Christianity is fighting for its very life. Now, I mentioned this before, that I actually didn't have a problem accepting evolution to some degree. I didn't really understand evolution, but it didn't seem like evolution was this final blow to Christianity, and if I accepted it, I wasn't able to be Christian. I didn't accept evolution because I didn't understand it, but the little bit I did actually understand, it didn't seem to conflict at all with this account in Genesis. We could still have Adam's fall. We could still have that with evolution. It's just that it would apply to humans, but we're following Adam because of this genealogical connection to Jesus. That's really it. It's not that Adam was the best person or the only person around at that time. There were other creations, but we just kind of follow him because, that's where Jesus eventually comes from. So this idea that, without Adam's fall, that's a bit odd. That we can't have Adam's fall because of evolution just seems a bit odd. And of course, we're not talking about abiogenesis, so God could have created humans and then just started off there. So that's something I didn't really have trouble with. The other problem is that I didn't see a purpose to life with Christianity. This whole idea that we're just here for a second and then we die and then eternity is what really matters. Well, why not just create us in eternity? And then why create anybody sinful in the first place? Or why allow people to go to hell in the first place? Or if the angels are judged differently than humans are judged, why do we have to be condemned to the same place? Why couldn't there be like a temporary hell for humans to repay their debt or something and then be redeemed and brought into heaven? Why do we have to be with the angels who rebelled against God knowing God? That's very different than a person being on earth and not being convinced. It's not really the same, and I don't think it should be punished the same. So I don't know. I just didn't see a purpose to Christianity at all. That was one of the things that kind of pulled me a little bit out of Christianity too, is it just didn't seem to make sense. The world through a Christian lens just didn't make any sense to me. Let's check out the footnote here. Okay, so we see that he actually read it out of American Atheist from 1978 as opposed to as quoted by. So good on him there. While Bosworth predicted the demise of Christianity without Genesis, he might as well have predicted the demise of civilization without God. Friedrich Nietzsche, who provided the philosophical framework for Hitler's Germany, understood this better than most. Are we getting atheism gets us to Nazi Germany? Are we already there? Did anybody have that on their bingo card? Thus, he predicted that the death of God in the 19th century would ensure that the 20th century would be the bloodiest century in human history. Okay, fantastic. Are we going with what? Pol Pot, Soviet Union, Hitler. Let's check it out. C.F. Morris, The Long War Against God. The tragic fact that the 20th century has witnessed more bloodshed than any other previous century nullifies an often repeated accusation against Christianity, namely that Christianity cannot be true because more suffering and death have resulted in the name of God than for any other reason. At the end of the 20th century, however, with clear hindsight, we must not fail to recognize the ripened fruit of atheistic philosophies that have fully actualized in the century's wars of extermination domination, in Marxist and Leninist totalitarianism, in Hitler's militaristic version, and so on, not including the horrendous holocaust of untold millions of babies through abortion. While it is tragically true that many people throughout history have misused the name of God to justify wickedness, there is no question that at the end of the 20th century, the blood of multiplied millions drips on the hands of atheistic, materialistic mentality, thanks to Philip Johnson for emphasizing this point. I would say no thank you to Philip Johnson. As I was reading this, I was thinking about the atomic bomb. Was this created by an atheistic United States? Is that what they're saying? This idea that Hitler wasn't religious? I don't know where this idea comes from, that Hitler was somehow atheist. I'm not sure where that idea comes from either. He absolutely wasn't. This idea about abortion, horrendous holocaust of untold millions of babies through abortion. Maybe we should look at why there was so much abortion. And who got it? Was it just only atheists? Or were there some policies? Were there some problems with things like women's rights, family planning, that women were kind of left to do this? I mean, this idea of, for example, that you cannot be raped by your spouse, that's something that became illegal in very recent history. And in some places, it's still not illegal. So if you are not interested in having a child and you are being forced into pregnancy by a person who, by legal accounts, is doing nothing wrong, I think that abortion is a perfectly reasonable response to that. I mean, if you're not prepared to have a child, especially a child with a monster who's forcing you to do this, that's disgusting, right? Why would you go through a pregnancy with this kind of individual, especially against your wishes? That's horrifying. So again, this is already, we're barely into this chapter and it's already so stupid. I think after suffering through that whole book the last time, I'm less hesitant about calling it stupid. Okay, this is a stupid argument, especially this idea that Hitler had anything to do with atheism. It's stupid. In the final analysis, more consequences for society hinge on the issue of human origins than any other. Among them are the sovereignty of self, the sexual revolution, and survival of the fittest. Sovereignty of self. The supposed death of God ushered in an era in which humans proclaimed themselves sovereigns of the universe. Oh, where? Nowhere was this more in evidence than at the Darwinian Centennial Convention, which celebrated the 100th anniversary of the publication of Darwin's The Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection. With pomp and ceremony, Sir Julian Huxley, the great-grandson of Thomas Huxley, Darwin's bulldog, boasted, "In the evolutionary system of thought, there is no longer need or room for the supernatural. The earth was not created, it evolved. So did all the animals and plants that inhabit it, including our human selves, mind and soul, as well as brain and body, so did religion. Evolutionary man can no longer take refuge from his loneliness by creeping for shelter into the arms of a divinized father figure whom he himself created." And we see Julian Huxley as quoted in That Their Words May Be Used Against Them, 1997. While the evolutionary system of thought was credited for expunging the need for God, in reality, it is merely the repackaging of an age-old deception. In the very first book of the Bible, Satan tells Eve that if she eats the forbidden fruit, your eyes will be opened, you will be like God, knowing good and evil. Okay, this was a big problem that I had too, reading the Bible as a Christian. It doesn't say Satan. It doesn't say Satan. It just says a serpent. It says that the serpent was the craftiest of God's creations. That's it. It's like Genesis 3:1. And this idea that it was just a serpent and God created serpents to be crafty, craftier than humans, intelligent. It was just a talking serpent. I can't say snake because at that time it was on 4 legs apparently. But, even now I don't think that it's a representation of Satan. I think it's a representation of the snake. And in a lot of religions, snakes are seen as this provider of wisdom. I think that this idea about the serpent or the snake coming to Eve, talking about knowledge, knowing the difference between good and evil, and being deceptive. Like if you follow it, you're gonna just anger Yahweh. I think this came off more to tell people to avoid those religions. That following Yahweh is something you do exclusively. This isn't something where you can follow Yahweh and then follow some other deity as well. And then we find out, later on with stuff like the 10 Commandments, God is a jealous God and you have to put him first and all this other stuff. So this idea to me, I don't think that the serpent was ever supposed to represent Satan. I think that's a bizarre idea, having read it and having understood just what a serpent typically represents in historical religions. What Satan was communicating was that Eve could become the final court of arbitration. She could determine what was right and what was wrong. See, I never felt that way reading this. So I'm gonna, hopefully he can explain how he came to that conclusion. I thought it was a bit weird that if we don't already know good and evil, then how can Yahweh punish us for doing evil, for not doing good, which is following his command? How can he punish us for that if we don't already know it? That just, I don't know, it just seems very strange. Humanity's newfound autonomy sacrificed truth on the altar of subjectivism. Ethics and morals were no longer determined on the basis of objective standards, but rather the size and strength of the latest lobby group. With no enduring reference point, societal norms were reduced to a matter of preference. Well, first of all, objective standards where, right? This idea about Yahweh being the objective standard, well, he's created the standard subjectively. It favors him. It favors not only him, but it favors worshiping him. It favors following him. So thou shalt not kill, but if I tell you to kill your son, you better go through with it and hope that I stop you. You see what I mean? So this idea that, oh, it's objective, I don't think so. I really don't. I don't think the Bible supports that there is an objective standard. I think Yahweh has his own standard and he constantly violates it, does a bunch of stuff that we would consider to be bad or evil or just objectively detrimental to society, right? And I think it's also very good for us to reevaluate what we think and what we believe is the best way for society to progress. If we don't do that, then we stagnate. And where we stagnate may not be the best. I don't have to cite all of the horrible things that have happened in history to various groups of people. You guys already know that. So this idea that, oh, we would have been better off just following that, that's pretty gross, Hank. This idea that, well, everything would be okay because if Hank goes back in time 100 years, he's fine. If I go back in time 100 years, I'm not. I'm mixed race and female and employed. And I served in the military, right? I was trained in the same way male Marines were trained. So this idea that, okay, well, everything is fine if we just keep going back in time, no, they're not. And I maybe Hank isn't considering that. I don't know. I mean, I would have been burned as a witch. You know what I mean? One of the most devastating consequences of humanity's repackaging of Satan's age-old deception was the sexual revolution. Let's see how he characterizes the sexual revolution. Let's see this. I once heard that noted evolutionist Sir Julian Huxley was asked why people had so quickly embraced the theory of evolution. He reputedly reported, "It is because the concept of a creator God interferes with our sexual mores. Thus, we have rationalized God out of existence. To us, he has become nothing more than the faint and disappearing smile of the cosmic Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland." His response eloquently captures the spirit of the evolutionary paradigm. So, So people want to believe in evolution because they want to do sexy sex, all the sex in time. Okay. Let's read the quote. Please tell me it's at least quoted for something that Sir Julian Huxley wrote. Oh, okay. I first heard this story in a sermon by Dr. D. James Kennedy. Aldous Huxley, Sir Julian's brother, expressed similar sentiments in describing his own intellectual development. Like so many of my contemporaries, I took it for granted that there was no meaning to the world. This was partly due to the fact that I shared a common belief that the scientific picture of abstraction from reality was a true picture of reality as a whole, partly also to other non-intellectual reasons. I had motives for not wanting the world to have a meaning, consequently assumed that it had none, and was able without any difficulty to find satisfying reasons for this assumption. For myself, as no doubt for most of my contemporaries, the philosophy of the meaninglessness was essentially an instrument of liberation. The liberation we desired was simultaneously liberation from a certain political and economic system and liberation from a certain system of morality. We objected to the morality because it interfered with our sexual freedom. The supporters of these systems claimed that in some way they embodied meaning, a Christian meaning they insisted of the world. There was one admirably simple method of confuting these people and at the same time justifying ourselves in our political and erotic revolts. We could deny that the world had any meaning whatsoever. Okay, well this actually comes from a quote, apparently, of something that Huxley actually wrote, but I first heard this story in a sermon. Now he doesn't, I guess he does say it, he reputedly retorted. So apparently he said this thing. And this is what you're going to start off the sexual revolution with something that you heard one time from a person of bias. Okay. This idea too is again, Huxley doesn't speak for atheists. None of the Huxleys do. So this idea that Huxley, we can turn to him and something he said decades ago, that we should care, that's like us saying, oh, well, because Freud believed in these really bizarre beliefs about, oh, every boy wants to have sex with his mom and that kind of stuff, that's all, the foundation of psychology, and all people that follow psychology, practice psychology, study psychology, or are seen by psychologists, all of them believe the same thing. No, they don't. And it would be wrong and stupid to even suggest that. But that's really what we're doing here. That's this whole section. It's just dedicated to the Huxley brothers being perverts. That's it. That's the foundation of this section of the book. The Huxley bros like to put their pieces into other things. What? And with God relegated to the status of a Disney character, we grabbed all the gusto we could. And what we got in return was adultery, abortion, and AIDS. 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 AIDS is our got in return. What we got in return was adultery, as if adultery didn't exist forever. Abortion, as if abortion didn't exist forever. Even abortion, if you want to call a miscarriage abortion, God aborts, 50% or so of pregnancies. But AIDS. Hank, you mother Freuder. AIDS. He thinks that that's what we get in return. He's already terrible. Hank is already terrible. And this also means that when I read this, all I could think was, yeah, preach it, brother. I mean, that's what I was raised to believe. Which is so bizarre, because again, the Bible's got adultery in it. There's pregnant people being killed in the Bible. But no, that's what we get now, is adultery. How would we get more adultery with the sexual revolution if more people are able to explore their sexual curiosities prior to getting married? Why would that lead to more adultery? And I'm not saying it doesn't, I'm just saying, does it? I wonder if Hank has seen this. So at least in the United States, when we're looking at now, or I guess 2010 to 2016, but modern times. It's 20% of men and 13% of women report that they've had sex with someone other than their spouse while they've been married. And the highest demographic for this is people between the ages of 60 to 80, depending on the sex of the person. So for men, it's like 70 to 79, still pretty high with 80 plus. For women, the peak is between 60 and 69. So these are people that were around, yeah, I guess around the sexual revolution, but so is 70 to 79 and 80 plus. So if you're in that older age group, the 70s to 80 plus, this puts you born around 1930, 1940. And this would mean that your morality, right, is impressed upon you definitely before the sexual revolution, and it's this age group that's actually reporting more extramarital affairs. Now notice they're not having extramarital affairs at the age of 80. They're just saying throughout my married life, this is how many times that I've reported having cheated on my spouse. So this could have happened early on in the marriage. This could have happened, in the 1950s, quite frankly. So that would be before the sexual revolution. Again, this idea that, we're holding on to these older morals, that things were better before this time period, and people like Hank can tell us this because they are products of that time period. This is the group that's actually having the most extramarital affairs. They're committing the most adultery. So this is the group that should have all the solid Christian God morality pre-sexual revolution, and they're the ones having the most extramarital affairs. Okay, well, I guess he didn't look this up. It is difficult to create a survey where people want to respond honestly. That's something that is hard to construct. But assuming that they did as good as they could have, it would be really interesting to know what some of the factors were for that. Also, I would argue that for adultery, maybe some of the things limiting adultery were not so much personal morality, but but things like a stronger tie to the local community, so less of a tie to the outside world and more of, I don't want to be judged by people in my local community. And the fact that adultery was illegal. So if you were caught, you could be punished legally for that. So those are some of the things that would kind of limit it. But on the other hand, being forced into an early marriage, being forced into a marriage where you are, really unhappy, you feel trapped, your spouse may be non-responsive, they may be kind of shutting you out, they may be physically harming you, they may be emotionally harming you, and you're otherwise just feeling stifled in that relationship. Getting a divorce was not something that was easy to do, so it makes a lot of sense that it was much easier to have an extramarital affair at that time period, especially when you don't have things like a bunch of security cameras that could catch somebody, or even cell phones. We've seen those videos where people whip out their cell phone, they start recording, and they're gonna run up on what they think is their partner cheating on them, and then they can put it on the internet for everybody else to see and to be, to have that person be shamed. That's not something people had in the past. So there was a level of hiddenness that could still occur with this adultery. So this idea that adultery has become commonplace, I don't see why, especially if the divorce rate went up from the pre-sexual revolution time period. So if people are able to just get a divorce, then this idea that they're going to be trapped in this marriage and feel a desire to necessarily want to cheat on their spouse, that would be reduced because of the fact that it's easier to get a divorce, not being pressured as much into getting married. That's also a reason to not be locked into a marriage. And there are people that just stay together. They don't get married. They just stay together with the same partner for years, for decades. That's something that's happened. And, again, this is not, I guess, cheating on your spouse in that kind of sense. But it also makes it easier that if you are unhappy, if you are in a position that may make you look outside the marriage for some kind of satisfaction, or outside the partnership for some kind of satisfaction, this might be something where it is a little bit easier to separate from your partner because you're not legally bound to them in the first place. So I don't understand what ideas that Hank used to put together that married couples are cheating on each other more because of the sexual revolution. I would assume, that's my guess, is it would be less or at least the same. So people fixate on feelings instead of fidelity. Fidelity is a feeling, isn't it? Wanting to be faithful to your spouse, loving your spouse, putting your spouse's feelings above you because you care about your spouse, because you have a basic empathy. This is still a feeling too. So this idea that, people fixate on feelings, that's why people don't cheat. As a result, nearly half of all new marriages end in divorce. Right, so then why would adultery go up? That's the weird part. What's the footnote here? As of 1988, the U.S. marriages ending in divorce is 43%. The LA Times records experts predicts nearly half of all marriages will end with the judge parceling out houses and cars and children like so much chattel, which is signs indicate shift toward divorce, LA Times. Okay, so who is Cheryl Stolberg and why should we care, right? So experts predict. Why not cite the experts? Why not cite their prediction? Why are we citing Cheryl Stolberg? We do have a link here about divorce. Well, let's see what it is now. It's not there. Okay, well, let's see what we can find. Like an easy percentage that Hank was talking about. If you do just plug the numbers, it ends up with 32.6%. So it's actually lower than what was reported or guessed by Cheryl citing experts, whatever that meant. So that's interesting. Okay, so they've gone down. Cool. That doesn't really help Hank. Abortion has become epidemic as people embrace expediency over ethics. What do you mean by expediency over ethics? In America alone, the death toll for preborn children has exceeded 30 million. So again, this is if you decide to call any pregnancy a preborn child. That's a bit of a loaded terminology, especially when we have different terms for it, like a zygote and so on. And the reason for the abortions are probably not listed. Let's see what he says here for citing for 12. Research organization founded by Planned Parenthood reports 31 million legal abortions occurred between 1973 and 1994. Estimated 50 million abortions occur worldwide. Okay, so we can annihilate abortion arguments. I guess we can check the appendix out during a maybe a live stream or something. So again, this is one of those things that abortions happened, and I'm not talking miscarriage, I'm talking abortions. We've had methods to induce abortion for a very long time, And this idea that, okay, now because it's documented, I mean, well, then what was it before? You know, was it 30 million in 20 years before? Maybe. I guess that would depend on how many people get pregnant, right, in that year, but, or in those years. I would wonder about a percentage of the population. I know 30 million sounds like a lot, but at the same time, our population is considerably higher now than it was like at the start of 1900, for example, and before then. So I wonder if the percentage is similar. I wonder if the percentage is lower since there's been more reliable birth control. I wonder if the percentage is affected by things like being able to see if the child has some kind of birth defect and the decision to not continue the pregnancy because it's just going to be a lot of turmoil and hardship on the family just to give birth to something that's not viable. And that's where all the questions that I have for Hank would come in. And I think this is the problem where he's just saying, look at these statistics. Look, there's a number. Isn't that scary? And we're not really factoring in why this number exists, why it's as high as it is. Are we objectively doing more harm or objectively doing more benefit? So I think this is where, yeah, the problem kind of comes in is Hank is throwing stuff at us and saying, look, you know, there's a citation, all this other stuff, which is great because Frank and Norm, their citations were trash. But this idea that it's kind of not fleshed out, you know, and that's the problem I'm having. There's a lot of factors that go into this, and I don't think Hank has explored any of them. AIDS has become pandemic as people clamor for condoms rather than for commitment. More people have died worldwide from AIDS than America's lost in all of its wars combined. So we're going to check footnote 13. The Department of the Veterans Affairs estimates a total of 1 million plus deaths in American military service through the wars, but HIV/AIDS estimates 11.7 million worldwide. Well, part of that could be the fact that it was like a blessing that Christians thought because it looked like it was only targeting gay men. Isn't that wonderful? So we don't even need to try to address it. So all of these people that died early on that Hank is lumping into this, oh, isn't this so sad that all these people have died, was such a punishment, whatever. He's happy about this. This is not him saying like what a tragedy. He's actually thrilled because to people like Hank, the people that get AIDS are gay men and cheaters and bisexual men. That's it. And all of the women that sleep with them because they don't have any morals. That's it. So for him, this is good, which is really gross. I mean, that's what I was taught in church, that AIDS is basically the punishment for people being sexually immoral. So that's what they get, you know? It's basically a fast track, the highway to hell, if you will, the fast way to get there. So for Hank, he's thrilled about that. Yeah, absolutely thrilled. Oh, look at that, gay men. Wonderful. And then he quotes Huxley. Is this Huxley? The concept of a creator God interfered with our sexual mores, as if gay people just started to exist after the sexual revolution. Okay, come on, Hank. Come on. Ironically, while prophylactics contribute to the problem, they have been positioned as the key to prevention. In the government-sponsored radio advertisement Naked, lead singer Anthony Kiedis from the Red Hot Chili Peppers says, I've been naked on stage, I've been naked on magazine covers, I was born naked, and of course I'm naked whenever I have sex, but now I'm on the radio. Disrobing sounds. So I may as well get naked again. There, I'm naked, see? And what I have here is a condom, a latex condom. I wear one whenever I have sex, not whenever it's convenient or whenever my partner thinks of it. Every time. Look, they're easy to open. Sounds of a package opening. A breeze to put on. And best of all, they stop the spread of HIV. Now I'm naked with a condom. But I'm not saying you should have sex, and I'm not saying you shouldn't have sex, but I'm saying wear a latex condom if you're gonna have sex. Just think of this as a helpful demonstration, and remember, you can be naked without being exposed. I'm sure Hank thinks of this as like a horrible debauchery, but no, I think it's very eye-catching or ear-catching and a good way to talk about it. It's just radio spot from, as quoted in James Dobson, Family News from Dr. James Dobson, 1994. Okay. Not only has sex been glorified in the media, it's also been glorified in movies, through music, and by Madison Avenue. That was also pre-sexual revolution, okay? Why don't you come up and see me sometime? That was not post-sexual revolution, all right? Little sister, don't you kiss me once or twice and say it's very nice, and then you run, little sister, don't you do what your big sister done? When I was listening to Elvis Presley songs as a child, it was just music. And when I tried to learn what the lyrics were so I could sing along, it didn't really have a meaning until I became a teenager and thought, I don't listen to these disgusting modern rap songs because of how sexual they are, but we're sitting here listening to songs like Afternoon Delight. We're sitting here listening to Elvis basically talking about how he's tried to get with the older sister, but she wasn't interested in doing him. So little sister of that girl I was dating, let me stick it in ya, because don't be like your big sister. I mean, that's nasty. That's just straight up nasty. And this, again, it's before the sexual revolution. I mean, not Afternoon Delight, but the Elvis Presley thing. So this idea about the media only now glorifying it post-sexual revolution, which is what he must think, it's in this section. I mean, is he unaware of all of the sexual writing and sexual plays and sexual poems and sexual every other type of media that existed before the 1900s? Is he aware of this? Does he really think that this is recent? He does, right? He has to. If he puts it in sexual revolution, that this is all a cause or a result of the sexual revolution, he has to, right? The Song of Solomon, come on. That's the one when you're a teenager and you feel in some type of way that you can't express to your pastor. That's the book of the Bible that you read to get all the tingly binglies, okay? The Song of freaking Solomon, come on. Only one rule seems to endure. Life has no rules. Where does life have no rules? What do you mean life has no rules? There's so many rules in society. What are you talking about, Hank? Oh my goodness. Attempting to rationalize God out of existence in order to do away with his laws and morality is as absurd as voting to repeal the law of gravity because people have fallen off buildings, bridges, or boats. Yeah, if you pick a pervert who says a thing and you say, look at all of these other people that must agree with this pervert, that's as stupid as some nonsense, right? Well, yeah, it is going to sound stupid. Why don't you pick people that actually have something to say other than, let me see how many things that my body parts will fit into? Do you know what I mean? This is so bizarre. It's such a cherry-picking kind of example. Even a unanimous vote could not change the deadly consequences for someone who later attempts to jump off a 10-story building. Yeah, of course, Hank. We cannot violate God's physical or moral laws without suffering disillusionment, destruction, and even death. I just had a flashback to reading the Frank and Norm book. That's not good, Hank. That's not good. And then survival of the fittest. Evolution not only dispenses with God and attempts to make humans the center of the universe. No, it does. Okay, so Hank is pulling a Frank. Because I've decided this, I'm going to now use it as a statement of fact. So Hank makes it up, and now he thinks it's true. And so now for the rest of this section, the rest of the book, he's going to repeat it as if it's a true thing that he has established as true. But evolutionism is racist as what? Wonderful. It's racist. Not Christian dogma, not the Bible, not any other religious text, right? But evolutionism. Okay, let me guess. He's going to quote something from Darwin. Consider the following excerpt from a letter written by Charles Darwin in 1881. The more civilized so-called Caucasian races have beaten the Turkish hollow in the struggle for existence. Looking to the world at no very distant date, what an endless number of the lower races will have been eliminated by higher civilized races throughout the world. Okay, 15. Letter from Charles Darwin, Life and Letter, quoted by Henry M. Morris, Scientific Creationism, Public School Edition, emphasis added. Okay, so it's as quoted and it's emphasis added. Also, this is, what about the manifest destiny, the white man's burden, all of this other stuff, this belief that comes from Christians who believed they were more civilized and therefore needed to spread out or needed to enslave for their benefit. I mean, this doesn't, it's this idea again that, what is it, bad people will do bad things, good people will do good things, but to get a good person to do something bad, it takes religion, something like that. There are people that are terrible, and they're going to use any excuse to justify their being terrible. If that excuse is evolution, if that excuse is religion, then that's what it is, right? The difference is that evolution is interpreted a certain way, but it doesn't say anything beyond, hey, here's the step-by-step way that things can change over time. This is the process that happens. And then that can be interpreted however one so desires. Apparently the Huxley brothers wanted to stick pieces into other pieces, and that's how they interpreted it. But it doesn't say that. That's not what evolutionary biology is about, right? Whereas with religion, it actually does say some of the stuff in there. You know, slaves obey your masters, that kind of stuff. Lest this be considered merely an aberration, note that Darwin repeated the sentiment in his book, The Descent of Man. He speculated, at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. Okay, so, you know, my ancestors were taken over as savage races by people before, 300 years before, the evolution of species through natural selection idea as proposed by Darwin. They did it because they were Catholic. That's why. God told them to do it. God said it was okay. So again, this doesn't do anything for me. This doesn't convince me, oh, evolution is so bad, because again, it has to be interpreted that way. Whereas there were people who had their religious text saying, no, it's okay for us to enslave you. It's okay. It's okay for us to kill you too, especially if we deem you as witches. The quote continues, at the same time the anthropomorphous apes will no doubt be exterminated. The break between man and his nearest allies will then be wider, for it will intervene between man in a more civilized state, as we may hope, than even then the Caucasian, as some ape as low as baboon, instead now between the Negro or Australian and the gorilla. So this break between man and his nearest allies, and that we're going to exterminate anthropomorphous apes, and that doesn't happen, right? So I think that Hank actually including this is to his detriment, because this was a prediction from Darwin, biased from his time period, biased from his standpoint, biased from him being a piece of crap, and that he believed that there would be this wider extermination that happens, and it didn't. So doesn't this show that Darwin was wrong in his prediction? Therefore, why would we believe this other stuff is somehow correct or valuable to even quote to prove racism, right? This other stuff didn't happen, so why would it prove this? Oh, it's Charles Darwin, Descent of Man, as in Robert Maynard Hutchins' great book, Books of the Western World. Okay. I don't know, it just, again, so what? Some racist had some idea. Who cares? In addition, he subtitled his magnum opus, The Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. 17, it's been argued in the subtitle, The Origin of the Species by Means of Natural Selection probably does not intend by the term race to speak on the issue of distinctions among humans. However, his overall theory clearly extends the meaning of race to encompass the concept of subspecies distinction among group of humans. Thus, in his view, the more civilized so-called Caucasian races have beat the Turkish Hollow in the struggle for existence. Again, as quoted in Morris Scientific Creationism, emphasis added. Keeps doing the as quoted in. I just wonder how much context is missing from what he's actually quoting. You know what I mean? Because he's only getting this piece fed to him through somebody else. It is interesting, isn't it? That's most of this so far. That is a bit of a different kind of frustration. You know, with Frank and Norm, this was like, oh, a conversation I had. Oh, this other thing that Norm wrote. You know, it was ridiculous. But I don't know if this is any better. This is Hank basically saying, other people have cherry-picked this for me, and I actually haven't gone to check to see if they took it out of context. But I believe it, and I'm going to share it with you, so you can believe it too. You know, that's just such a... It's like he knows that he's not reading it in context. But he's so confident in what he's saying that doesn't even matter to him. So much that he's going to share it with us so that we can also believe the way he believes. That's just bizarre. That's a different kind. I don't know. Which one is worse? Who do you think is worse? The Frank and Norm book and their citations, which are just terrible. Or the citations we keep getting here in the Hank book. Which one do you think is worse? And Darwin was not alone in his racist ideology. Thomas Huxley, who coined the term agnostic and was the man most responsible for advancing Darwinian doctrine, argued that, and then it goes on, let's just check this. Agnostic, coined from the Greek, literally means someone who lacks knowledge, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's a weird, wow, so what? No rational man cognizant of the facts believes that the average Negro is the equal, still less the superior, of the white man. It is simply incredible to think that he will be able to compete successfully with his bigger brain and smaller jawed rival in a contest which is to be carried on by thoughts and not by bites. And this is from 19, Thomas Huxley, as quoted in Morris, The Long War Against God, emphasis added. The funny part here is we know that context has been removed because we see all of these ellipses. It is simply incredible to think that ... or of the white man ... So this is now I'm not saying that what's left over here is good, right? There's nothing good here at all. And it's also very foolish because now we understand about brains and this idea about smaller jawed rival. This is bizarre to even think that any of the apes were somehow superior through bites. This is ridiculous. So this is just a stupid thing to even say. It's just dumb. But we also can see there's actually context removed, or there's pieces missing from this, and Hank is just quoting it just fine. Emphasis added. Huxley was not only militantly racist, but also lectured frequently against the resurrection of Jesus Christ, in whom we are all one, Galatians 3:28, in sharp distinction to the writings of such noted evolutionists as Herjlicka, Haeckel, and Houghton. Biblical Christianity makes it clear that in Christ there is neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. Okay, so again, women are not equal. We can see that in all of the stuff we have in the Old Testament, right? Slaves obey your masters. I shall not permit a woman to speak in or teach in church. I mean, where do you want to start? This is so ridiculous for him to think biblical Christianity says we're all equal. No, it just says we're all bad, but it definitely doesn't say we're all equal. Let's see. One of the chief founders of institutional physical anthropology in the U.S. Blah blah blah. Okay, philosophical forerunner of Adolf Hitler, famous for his now debunked recapitulation theory. Okay, so again, so what? So what? These are not, I say again, evolution has a list of things and people can interpret that. They perhaps should not, but they do. That is different than the expressly sanctioned commands in a book such as the Bible. The other thing is that with evolution, we don't have this idea that Darwin was some kind of god that bestowed this wisdom upon us and it should never be changed. It's that Darwin was a person, and there's some stuff that's interesting and there's some stuff that we can kind of toss out. But we can't do that with the Bible, because the Bible, however you get us there, some people do think it was like penned by God somehow, and others think it was influenced by God. Whatever type of Christian you are, we get to something like the Bible that it was sanctioned by God. It's something that we cannot change. We cannot add to it. We cannot remove it. And this is where some of the different sects get into an argument. Something like the Book of Mormon. Well, it says don't add to it. They added to it. That kind of thing, right? So there's this idea that we can't argue what's here. Now, people do, of course. But there is an idea that what is written here cannot be challenged. It cannot be changed because it is perfect. Because it comes from God, who is also perfect. And this is where I think Hank kind of fails to understand evolution, science, atheists. This idea that so what if Haeckel was messed up? I don't care. That doesn't change how true it is that you are not a carbon copy of one of your parents. What? Okay, so this guy thought something that was stupid and said that he had a scientific foundation for it, which he doesn't. Therefore, let's throw everything out. No, that's ridiculous. But again, Hank's coming at this from a Christian bias, and so he's reading it as if we think that Darwin is this untouchable character in history, and he's not. What's this 21? We already see this from Galatians. It is pervasive and consistent theme throughout Scripture that all people are created in the image of God and are of equal value. No, it's not. From one man, he made every nation of men. I mean, even from one man, he made every nation of men. Not from one man and one woman, right? It's just somehow Adam just kept spawning more Adams by himself. This is perfect. There it is. We're all of equal value because Adam alone made every nation of men, right? Okay, come on, Hank, you just disproved yourself right here. Also, to parallel Galatians 3:28, Malachi 2:10 reads, "Have we not all one Father? Did not one God create us? Why do we profane the covenant of our fathers by breaking faith with one another?" Again, what about your mothers? Right? So why not refer to them as a group? The covenant of our parents by breaking faith with one another. I'm so glad that Hank has included these, so I don't even have to look him up. Thanks, Hank. That was really helpful. At some future period, not very distant, measured by centuries, civilized races of man exterminate, blah, 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 blah. And we see here It looks like a concentration camp and people that have since passed on. Great. What's the point? Hitler was Christian. In Christianity, we sing red and yellow, black and white, all are precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. Why are we citing 22? Jesus loves the little children. So what? Okay. Well, fantastic. So what? Why not just say Jesus loves the little children of the world? Doesn't matter what color you are. Okay. In the evolutionary hierarchy, blacks are placed at the bottom, yellows and reds somewhere in the middle, and whites on top. Look, I get that he's going to quote this song and say it has no date. I don't know the date of this song, and we can just assume that this song, which I also sang when I was in church, was again one of those products of its time, that we don't use words like yellow people these days. But Hank does. He just says, well, yeah, the yellows are in the middle, the reds are in the middle. Okay, wow. You know, it's one thing to quote, right? If you would have put quotes around it, okay, I guess. But what evolution? So notice here, he hasn't quoted the evolutionary hierarchy. What evolutionary hierarchy do we have? What has he shown us in an evolutionary hierarchy? All he's done is quoted something from Darwin in the 1800s that was his personal opinion that had nothing to back it up. Where in evolution, in the theory of evolution, where does it say that there is a hierarchy? Where? I've never learned that. Where is this evolutionary hierarchy? Where? As H.F. Osborne, the director of the American Museum of Natural History and one of the most prominent American anthropologists of the first half of the 20th century put it, the Negroid stock is even more ancient than the Caucasian and the Mongolian, as it may be proved by an examination not only of the brain, of the hair, the bodily characteristics such as teeth, genitalia, the sense organs, but of the instincts, the intelligence. The standard of intelligence of the average adult Negro is similar to that of an 11-year-old youth of the species Homo sapiens. Okay, again, congratulations. You cited a moron. Fantastic, okay? Reprinted as quoted in Morris. You know what? I think we can kind of lump as quoted in to be nearly as good as what Frank and Norm have said. Now, they say stuff like, in a conversation I had when I called this guy on the phone. I mean, is that much worse than what he's doing here? I didn't read this for myself. I don't know if I'm taking this out of context. I don't know if this is actually a quote from a Christian that this anthropologist is quoting, but was misrepresented as if the anthropologist was saying it, right? So we don't even know that, but believe it, because that's what I did. That's what Hank is saying. It is significant to note that some of the Crusaders and others who used force to further their creeds in the name of God were acting in direct opposition to the teachings of Christ. Yeah, well, I mean, they sure didn't spare the sword, and they sure went to all corners of the world to preach the gospel to every creature. The teachings of Osborne and others like him, however, are completely consistent with the teachings of Darwin. There's the problem. There's no teachings of Darwin that are part of evolution. Darwin's personal opinion about what he decided to read into for something like, over time, the genetics best suited for this region win out. Whatever Darwin taught beyond that, who cares? Number one. And again, number two, this is not the inerrant word of Darwin. There have been so many additions to evolutionary biology that this idea of constantly citing not just Darwin, but personal letters Darwin wrote about predictions that he had, that's not even evolution. That's not even evolution. This is, Does Hank realize that he sounds this stupid? Does he realize this? Indeed, social Darwinism has provided the scientific substructure for some of the most significant atrocities in human history. Yeah, and social Darwinism was wrong. It was based on this idea that not only is it survival of the fittest, and fittest must mean physically strongest and able to wage war the best, but it also completely ignores the idea that humans are social animals. We don't win by killing each other. This idea about like maybe leopards who can defeat the competition by getting into fights with other leopards, fine, those are leopards. They're solitary animals. But for social animals, we benefit by working together, not against each other. So the whole idea of social Darwinism is as intelligent as the idea of alpha males. And for exactly as stupid a reason, misunderstanding something that somebody said and you took it seriously and somehow decided to apply it to people. Ugh. Stupid! For evolution to succeed, it is as crucial that the unfit die as that the fittest survive. There it is. I just said it, right? So he totally misunderstands it too. Hank doesn't understand what he's talking about either. Martin Lubenow graphically portrays the ghastly consequences of such beliefs in his book, Bones of Contention. If the unfit survived indefinitely, they would continue to infect the fit with their less fit genes. Well, no, this isn't biblical times. We're not arranging marriages with people. I know that Hank would like that, but we're not doing that. The result is that the more fit genes will be diluted and compromised by the less fit genes. So again, if you choose to reproduce with somebody, it's clear that there's something about them that appealed to you, right? So this idea that they have unfit genes isn't really the case if they're able to survive well, and survive to the point that they're able to find a mate and reproduce. So I would argue, how could their genes be that unfit? On top of that, because of random genetic mutation, we still get less fit, quote unquote, genes. And I'm talking stuff that's like, you can't survive without machinery. We still get that, but that's born from people who may not even have those genetic mutations. So this is something that happened in the womb, and this is a negative impact on that individual's life, but it's from parents that didn't have those genes to contribute. This could either be some influence in the environment in the womb, or this could be some genetic mutation that happened from the otherwise typical genes. It's kind of like the idea of like Down syndrome, dwarfism, all of this other stuff. The people who have children with Down syndrome are usually not living with Down syndrome. The people who give birth to children that have dwarfism are not typically affected by dwarfism, right? So this also doesn't work in using the dwarfism example. There is a group of people, there's a village of people that everybody, or the vast majority, has dwarfism, but they also have a genetic change where they don't get, diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. That sounds way fit, doesn't it? So this idea that fitness looks a certain way, this is an idea that Hank is putting there. This is an idea that these other guys are putting there. This Lubenow guy is putting there. This isn't an idea that exists objectively, analyzing the environment and what it means to survive in that environment. This is somebody else's subjective idea. All right, so the concept of evolution demands death. Girl, the Bible demands death. Are you kidding? We start off with death. Are you kidding me? We start off that God sets us up to die, and then he gets mad that we do the thing that he programmed us to do, so he kills the whole earth. And then Christianity itself, individually, as opposed to Judaism or Islam, using the same root text, right? Christianity is nothing without Jesus dying. And that to live is Christ, but to die is gain. You are in a death cult, sir. How are you going to sit here and talk about, well, evolution demands death? No, evolution just is. There is no demand. That's like saying the stars demand obedience or something. It's such a ridiculous, the stars demand death. No, they don't. This whole system is set up on that. You believe in death. It's bizarre. Death is thus as natural to evolution as it is foreign to biblical creation. Oh my God. I just explained how the Bible, I can't even put, I can't. There's no sentence that can, I said it, you heard it, we'll move on. The Bible teaches that death is a foreigner, a condition superimposed upon humans and nature after creation. Right, by design, though, right, by design. Because God knew what was going to happen by design. Okay, thanks. Thanks that we got that figured out. And also the Bible teaches that death is gain, that through Christ's death we're redeemed, that in death we have happiness, that in death we see family members, and in death we are made whole, that in death we get to be with God, which is amazing. In death we have eternal life. So yeah, the Bible is against death. The Bible is against it. Who is this idiot? Congratulations. A creationist assessment of the human fossils. Great. An idiot. So this is just a chapter citing idiots of different beliefs. Fantastic. Adolf Hitler's philosophy that Jews were subhuman and that Aryans were supermen led to the extermination of 6 million Jews. In the words of Sir Arthur Keith, a militant anti-Christian physical anthropologist, the German Führer, as I have consistently maintained, is an evolutionist. He has consistently sought to make the practices of Germany conform to the theory of evolution. I mean, so what? He's still Christian. So what? One big problem with this line of argumentation is that Hitler didn't just want to kill the Jews. Not only did Hitler kill his own people, which one could argue has to do with eugenics, but he also wanted to conquer all of Europe because he believed that the Germans needed more space to spread out and enslave fellow Europeans. So if Hank is trying to argue that Hitler's pursuit of killing people and World War II and all of this other stuff was started for evolutionary purposes because he thought other races are lower than him, how is Hank going to explain that Hitler also wanted to conquer fellow Caucasians? Arthur Keith, as quoted in Morris. Morris is Hank's C.S. Lewis, isn't he? I mean, it looks like he's citing a lot of different stuff, but he's not. He's citing different books that Morris wrote, or a lot of the same book that Morris wrote. Tricky, tricky. Karl Marx, the father of communism, saw in Darwinism the scientific and sociological support for economic experiment that eclipsed even the carnage of Hitler's Germany. His hatred of Christ and Christianity led to the mass murder of multiplied millions worldwide. Karl Marx was so revered Darwin that his desire was to dedicate a portion of Das Kapital to him. As cited in Morris, The Long War Against God. As quoted in Morris, The Long War Against God. As quoted in Morris, The Long War Against God. As quoted in Morris, The Long War Against God. I mean, this is ridiculous at this point. I thought, okay, great, at least he's got all these citations and stuff, right? But instead, it's all from Morris. Ugh. Sigmund Freud, the founder of modern psychology. No, there were so many things that Freud had ideas about that we don't follow. So this idea that he's the founder of modern psychology, he's one of the people in the past that contributed to ideas of talking to people or reading into something, like the idea of the subconscious being something that affects what we do and our behavior. Sure. But to say he's the founder of modern psychology shows just how stupid and ignorant Hank is. I'm going to just say stupid and ignorant, because they're not the same thing. To be ignorant is one thing. To be stupid and ignorant is Hank. Was also a faithful follower of Charles Darwin. Who cares? Who cares what Freud thought? Who cares? His belief that man was merely a sophisticated animal led him to postulate that mental disorders were the vestiges of behavior that had been appropriate in earlier stages of evolution. Okay? As quoted in Morris, The Long War Against God. Daniel Goleman points out the evolutionary idea that Freud relied on is the maxim that ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, that is, that the development of the individual recapitulates the evolution of the entire species. I don't think that's relevant. I remember this part, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, very well, because this is like a big part of the book, and it talks about this idea that as you're developing in the womb, then you have a tail and then you don't, and you have gills and then you don't, this kind of idea that we go through all of the pre-Homo sapiens stages. And that is not what this is. This evolutionary idea that Freud relied on, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny, that is not what Freud believed about the vestiges that were appropriate in earlier stages of evolution. Freud was talking about behaviors that were leading to our survival during times like the Ice Age. This isn't the same as going through your pre-Homo sapien stages of evolution, this idea here. This is the idea that this got stuck in people, or in a certain percentage of the population, and a relatively large percentage of the population, because at a time in the past, when we were still Homo sapiens, there was some benefit to having this. One of the ideas is that we get this burst of adrenaline and have a response to it when there's some situation that causes us a great deal of stress, such as fear, for example. The problem is that we encounter these moments a lot more in our modern life because we're not encountering so much a physical danger, like, oh my gosh, there's a lion, but we're encountering just stressors that happen, for example, at work, or driving in traffic, or being stuck in traffic, or just being around a lot of people and not having a common goal that we all have to work for. So some people are acting selfishly or acting like jerks, and that kind of pisses you off, etc., right? So this idea that nowadays we're having trouble with stress and how this is negatively affecting our body, such as heart disease. This can go back to, well, at a time when we had a need to get a sudden spike of adrenaline to run away from something like a bear, there was a benefit to this. However, having that response constantly go off multiple times in the day because of interpersonal stress, because of traffic stress, because of being annoyed at work stress, this is actually causing us a lot of harm. So we thought it was beneficial, or it was beneficial at the time. This helped our ancestors get away from bears and lions and all of that stuff. Doesn't help us today. So that's an idea from evolutionary psychology, which is not something that Freud began. That's the other thing to remember. He didn't found evolutionary psychology. He had an idea, and then later on, things happened. And later on, we had people actually doing the research. But even still, this argument made about Goldman pointing out that the evolutionary idea relies on going back to the time when we were fish. No. And then again, it's from the same thing as quoted by Morris. This notion, which I refute in chapter 6, supposes that the conceptus at one stage is a fish rather than a fetus. You can't make this up, guys. From the Latin for infant, and is thus expendable. The human carnage that has resulted from this evolutionary dogma has eclipsed the atrocities of Hitler and Marx combined. So again, even without this concept, that's not why people are getting abortions. That's just not. It should be noted that Darwinian evolution is not only racist but sexist as well. Under the subheading differences in the mental powers of the two sexes, Darwin attempted to persuade followers that the chief distinction in intellectual powers of the two sexes is shewn by a man's attaining to a higher eminence in whatever he takes up than can women. Whether requiring deep thought, reason, or imagination, or merely the use of his senses and hands, we may also infer that the average mental power of a man must be that, or above that of a woman. Darwin, The Descent of Man. Wow, not as quoted by Moore or Morris. So again, who cares? Darwin has an idea that's not supported by science. Who cares? Same with Freud. Freud had ideas that were not supported by research. So who cares? So what? And he being Hank is proposing this as if we should care. And to a Christian reading this makes you think, oh, well, actually, those guys are the ones that are racist and sexist. They tell us that our Bible is racist and sexist. And yeah, I mean, it does say stuff that is pretty racist and sexist in there, but we're all, God and like a new covenant, and, we're all the same with Jesus. And, there's probably a reason that Paul said that women can't teach in the church, stuff like that. I was told it was because women at the time were not allowed to get an education. So Paul was saying, because you're uneducated, don't talk in the church, because that's going to convince the men that you shouldn't be allowed to talk in the church, because you're going to say something uneducated because you are uneducated, and they're going to assume it's because you're stupid, not because you're uneducated. And then they're going to blame you and choose not to let you get an education. And so Paul was really protecting women by telling them not to teach in church. That's what I was taught. And yeah, that held me over for a while. It did. I was, 16, 17. That held me over for a while. Until I realized God could just tell people, hey, don't treat women like that. Like he could tell, hey, maybe don't have slaves. I mean, he told us stuff like, hey, cut your foreskin off. Why couldn't he say those other things, right? A lot of important stuff apparently was said, but not don't have slaves and treat people equally. Seems a bit odd. In sharp contrast to the evolutionary dogma, Scripture makes it clear that all humanity is created in the image of God, that there is essentially equality between the sexes, essential equality, okay, and that slavery is as repugnant to God as murder and adultery. Slavery is repugnant to God. Oh, sir. God gave us instructions on how to take slaves and when to take slaves and when to let them go and when not to let them go. The women don't get let go because we're equal. While Scripture candidly acknowledges the existence of slavery, it never condones it. But again, it gives rules about it. That's the argument that I always heard. Oh, it was just like God was just telling people something because they didn't want to get rid of slavery. Okay, you think they want to get rid of their foreskin? Come on. So that was easier to tell people, get rid of your foreskin as opposed to stop being, don't be a dick, be a dude. Come on. In the last book of the Bible, Revelation chapters 17 and 18, God pronounces final judgment on an evil world system that perpetuates slavery. Wow, Revelation chapters 17 and 18. I'm sure that did a lot of good for all the people living during Deuteronomy times. Who cares? Who freaking cares? And I'm sure that nobody had slaves after Revelation was written, huh? Come on. You see, this is the exact thing that I was talking about. Exactly. Ugh. So stupid. But again, this shows that, I was raised in it. I'm not lying. Because we always have to ask ourselves stuff about Frank and Norm, and I guess Hank too, claiming they were atheists because they hated God, right? Ugh. And you're like, were you ever really atheist if you don't understand this stuff? I understand their arguments. They're just wrong, but I understand what they're saying and where they come from. They're just wrong. The consistent application of biblical principles inevitably leads us to emancipation. No, it doesn't. The consistent application of evolutionary principles inevitably leads to enslavement. No, it doesn't. Wow. Hank's just making stuff up. Notice there's no little note there. The tragic consequences of evolution can hardly be overstated. Denton correctly points out that it is one of the most spectacular examples in history of how highly speculative idea for which there is no really hard scientific evidence can come to fashion the thinking of a whole society and dominate the outlook of an age. Furthermore, says Denton, considering its historic significance and the social and moral transformation it caused in Western thought, one might have hoped that Darwinian theory was capable of a complete, comprehensive, and entirely plausible explanation for all biological phenomena, from the origin of life on through its diverse manifestations up to and including the intellect of man. That is neither fully plausible nor comprehensive is deeply troubling. One might have expected such a theory of such cardinal importance, a theory that literally changed the world, would have been something more than metaphysics, something more than a myth. Well, it isn't metaphysics, it's not a myth, but it's also not a bunch of stuff that Denton had hoped it would be. Then why would it? Does Denton not understand how science works? There's no, what, does he really think there's like this all-encompassing, yeah, he does, because he believes in God. It's this one all-encompassing idea that just answers all the questions. And that's what he thinks that there has to be in science. Oh my goodness. We're gonna click on this and then we're just gonna be done because I think this is the end. Okay, great. Denton, not quoted by Morris. In light of such tragic consequences, it is incredible to think that evolution is still being touted today as truth. It's incredible that you think that you're correct in what you're saying. The only reason that I went along with all the stuff Hank is saying, and I'm guessing the reasons that other Christians go along with what Hank is saying, is because this is the stuff that we're taught from the pulpit. He's not actually saying anything new. He's just adding quotes to it to make it seem more robust. So all these claims, these nonsensical claims that were told in church, he's adding what looks like evidence. But as we can see, a lot of it is either stuff that is taken out of context and we don't know to which extent, and neither does Hank. But on top of that, this is not prescribed by evolutionary theory. These are things that idiots of the past read into and decided based on their own stupid bias. There's nothing in the theory of evolution. There's nothing in evolutionary biology, evolutionary psychology, etc. There's nothing there that says, yeah, people believe it because they want to not be accountable to God and they want to just have sex with everything. There's nothing in there that says that. So for anybody to say it, that's their own thing. And Hank shouldn't be quoting this as if it's a mainstay of what these theories have to say. It's bizarre that he would. It's misleading that he would. And so for a Christian to read this, again, this is very sneaky. It really is. It really is. It's really sneaky. Because if you already don't know, if you know less about evolution than Hank does, and Hank does not understand evolution at all, it seems, if you know less about evolution than Hank, this seems very convincing. And that's the problem. That's really the problem. This is such a grift. He's really pulling a fast one, and all the other phrases that are associated with trickery and scamming people, because that's what he's doing with this. The responsibility of demonstrating that it is, in reality, a farce can no longer be left to a few hired guns in the bastions of higher learning. It is crucial that all thinking human beings become involved in the process as well. This is why I developed the acronym FACE, to make it easy for anyone to remember how to demonstrate the farce of evolution. We begin with the letter F, representing fossil follies. Darwin had predicted that the fossil record would bear him out. In reality, the fossil record has become one of the greatest embarrassments to his legacy. Really? Not the thing about racism? No? Not the sexist comment? The fossil record? Okay. Are you guys having fun yet? Yeah, wonderful. Well, if you made it this far, please put a lemon somewhere in your comment, and the normal spiel about checking out the details section for the Discord and maybe considering joining the cult either on Patreon or as a YouTube member, and join us so we can all be very frustrated together in our section of Discord or our sections for the members only in my community tab or on Patreon, and definitely when I see you guys for the cult member live stream at the end of every month, because this is really frustrating stuff. At least when we have those live streams, it's a lot more fun because we're talking about a little bit more of the exciting stuff about people getting possessed by demons and whatever, you know, so that's a lot more exciting than this, a little bit less frustrating, but not less upsetting, but just less frustrating. With that being said though, guys, you know, thanks for sticking with me, and as always, thanks for listening.
Train up a child in the way they should go, and they shan't depart from it. Spare the rod for the child's what we're told. They want to justify being hit. Children must obey their parents in all things. Honest pleases the Lord. But is that all I can expect from my life? Comes in submission till I'm floored. What if this isn't exactly true? Where would that even leave me and you? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me, erase all that guilt. Why would God create us evil and wrong and punish us from afar? They tell us we're broken, to sell us pure, we're worthy as we are. Among his names, why is one of them jealous? What does that even mean? Why require our worship anyway? Why does he need anything? He is the potter and we are the clay. He does what he wills. If that is not, what could we even do? It's his choice to save or kill. Why create this buster system? Where's all the alleged wisdom? If religion poisons everything, where is the antidote? Come drink the lemonade with me, erase all that guilt. Why would God create us evil and wrong and punish us from afar? They tell us we're broken, to sell us pure, we're worthy as we are. What if I'm a doubting Thomas? Why refuse to reach out to us? If we are to seek the Lord, why does he hide of his own accord? Why give us brains to reason, but using them is high